Everybody, and welcome to my presentation on the overview of instructional design models. So, in this presentation, I'll be talking about what is instructional design because we need to have a brief explanation about what instructional design is. And I'll move on to talk about the learning theories as a framework that will help us to understand more about instructional designs or the different learning theories that are usually used when it comes to instruction. And then we'll move on to talk about e-learning designs. I also talk briefly about Gagne's nine event of instruction, and we'll look at the real applications of the ADDIE model, and finally talk about Dick and Greg and Carrie briefly, and then move on to the conclusion. By the way, my name is A.Kaburi, and you are welcome to join me in this journey of my presentation. Now let's talk about the brief explanation about what instructional design is. So when we want to talk about instructional design, Bruce Montes 2015 had a brief explanation about instructional design, and he defined it as a systematic, scientific, and reflective process of creating instructional systems. And this process of developing instructional systems is the root of scientific and includes reflective components for itinerary improvement in our instruction. And so, for us to move on to talk about or to have a deeper understanding about this, what is instructional design, we need to first have to understand where we are going as a collective body of academicians, and how will we get there, and how will we know when we get or when we arrive at what we want to do or what we want to achieve in the near future. Now, let's talk about the learning theories as a framework, the major learning theories as a framework. So, when we talk about the different learning theories that we know, usually these three come into mind. That is behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. And each of them have different ways in which they work. For example, when we talk about the behaviorism, then we look at repetition and reinforcement because we are looking at human relations and behaviors. And cognition or cognitivism, then we are talking about the mind as well as the mental models or mental structures that goes into our learning process. And when we talk about constructivism, then we all know that that connotes or involves the creation or the construction of knowledge through active learning in real world context. So, with these learning theories as well as a framework, they also come in the same way as they work in terms of their feedback. So, for behaviorism, we look at feedback focus, and then the cognition, like I said, we talk about guiding principles in terms of our mental structures and connections as a rationale. Then with the constructivism, we're looking at developing strategic patterns that is in terms of the real world context. Now let's move ahead again to talk about the rapid e-learning. Rapid e-learning. So the rapid e-learning, we all know in terms of it's developing so fast in terms of content development in our digital learning environments. In these days, we know that e-learning is something that is growing so fast, and it has different kinds of components. And these are the components that are usually made up of the e-learning or the e-learning design. That is, for us to have an effective e-learning design, then these are the things that we should not leave out. And number one, talk about the set of learning objectives. We have to use learning template, the use of templates as well, and also try to gather feedback quickly. And by then, we now try to repeat the same thing over and over again. So when we look at our model here, the e-learning is a center, and we have institutional, pedagogical, technological. We also talk about the interface designs. We evaluate, we undergo management or resource support, and then we talk about the ethical portions of the e-learning. So rapid aspects of this model is why it falls under the behaviorism or of the continuum. So it can only surface as a task based or an instructional base to make it to make this kind of design or this rapid design very very effective. So the e-learning process, we see I have a diagram here which talks about the analysis of our learning process, which this is a rapid e-learning graph which shows the e-learning process in general. So we start with the analysis, we go to the design, then we talk about development, and we can see that planning comes before the analysis, and the evaluation is in the middle or at the center of it, holding everything together. And this particular block forms the content development aspect of the e-learning process. Then we move on to the content delivery aspect. So in the content delivery aspect, we see that we have evaluation as the center of it, and then we have delivery, we have administration, we have marketing, we have maintenance, and the evaluation is at the center of it in terms of the content delivery. So this e-learning process is developed into two categories. That is the content development part and then the content delivery part. So the content development part was what we looked at initially, and then the content delivery part is what we just discussed with the evaluation as the center of that particular category. Now, uh, nine events, Ghanaian's nine events of instruction. So Ghanaian's nine event has this kind of nine event of instruction that also gives us an idea of how we can apply this kind of our learning theories in terms of practicalities, in terms of our real life situations. So we have different strategies of different modes by which this nine events work, and we look at each and every one of them here. We have gaining attention, inform learners' objectives, proud learning also contribute, and this is in a cycler form as we can see here. So we can start from here, that is gaining attention of the learners, inform learners of objectives, move on to proud learning, that is our relevant previous knowledge, what we already know before. Then as instructors, we present our content to them, we provide them with guidance, we help them in terms of mentorship or instruction to practice what we have provided them in terms of the content. We give them assessment, we take feedback or provide them with feedback for them to improve upon it. Then we enhance retention and transfer to the job. That is the real world application. So this is the nine event instruction model from Ghana, which is also very, very important when it comes to our instructional design models or when we want to do instruction in the classroom. And it begins by trying to gain the attention of our learners. We inform them of the learners' objectives, like I said earlier on. Then we move on to talk about know or brainstorm them about their prior knowledge, that is their relevant previous knowledge, what the learners already know before. Then before we now present whatever we want to present as in the form of content to them, we provide them with guidance, help them to practice what the knowledge or the new content that we have given them. Then we now move on to provide them with feedback that will help them to improve what we have given them. We assess them before we now help them to enhance their retention, which can be transferred onto the real life situation to solve problems. When it happens like that, then we'll have proper learning process or cycle. Now let's look at the ADDIE. That is analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate, which was a model that came from the US military in 1970s. And we see it as an explanation of the IEDD model in 2023, which breaks down the component of analysis, design, development, implementation, evaluation into simple terms of course or curriculum design. And we can see it in the form of a cycle also. This US military training model, which was formulated in 1970s, is also very important and very crucial when it comes to instructional design. And this we must understand that this is important, but it can be sometimes time consuming because of the different components that they have to move through when we want to use the ADDIE model, because we have to look at the analysis of whatever model that we are doing. We have to design, we have to do analysis, we design, we develop, we implement, and evaluate. And each of these particular components has different time frames that are used. And that is why we say that they are time consuming when we want to apply this. Now, the real world application of this ADDIE model, you can use this, for example, in the context of a weekly vocabulary, want to teach a language model of in terms of art. Let's say our audience are the middle school students. Our goal is to introduce new terms with comprehension. Then our strategy will be to use a tip or the term information picture or chart in terms of in a form of digital mode. And then we repeat this ADDIE cycle that I mentioned earlier on here. We looked at the analysis, we do the design, we do the development, implement again, then we evaluate, and then the cycle continues. So this is just a sample of how we can do the real world application of this ADDIE model in terms of instruction. We can use this for different kind of lesson or different kind of instruction for different kinds of levels of learners. Now, before we move on to our final slide, let's talk about the Dick and Carey model as well, which was implemented in 1978 by Walter Dick and Lloyd Carey. And the key features of this particular model is also talks about the interconnected nature of the system of steps, which include learner, context, delivery, and outcomes. And with this particular Dick and Carey model, that is the constructing uses the constructivism learning theory model. And we know that with that one, it involves hands-on, it involves active learning. So when we see here how they are interconnected, the different components of this particular theory or the Dick and Carey model, they are interconnected. So we see that the right performance objectives develop criterion tests. They are in one way or the other related to the conduct of instruction analysis, and then this is also related to the development or the develop instructional strategies, develop and select instructional materials, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, what we are saying or what this particular model is saying is that they are interconnected. It means they cannot be isolated, and all of them contribute to the learning process, the instructional process, and teaching and learning process must go on and cannot be done in isolation. And it is categorized under the constructivist learning theory, which means that it involves hands-on activities, it involves active learning, and so on and so forth. So, in conclusion, I will say that instructional design equals to purposeful learning design. It must be done on purpose. The models help to align theory with practice. Best models depends on audience, the goals, and the context. So for us to have the instructional design means that it's equal to purposeful learning. It means we are doing it on purpose. We are designing a particular lesson or a particular instruction on purpose to achieve a particular aim. And the models that will help or align with the theory or with the practice, the best one depends on our audience. So if your audience are high school students, your audience are middle school or kindergarten students, then the audience or the levels of your learners and the goals as well as the context will give you the best model of instruction that you want to choose. So I think this is the end of my presentation under the instructional design models, and thank you. Buddy.